John Coulter. After recuperating from his wound at Fort Raymond, Coulter returned to the Three Forks country for a fall beaver hunt. John Potts, another veteran of the Lewis and Clark expedition, went along. As Coulter and Potts paddled up the Jefferson River, each in his own canoe, Blackfeet suddenly appeared on the east bank and commanded them to come ashore. Supposing the Indians meant robbery only, Coulter quickly cast his traps into the water and obeyed. Potts hung back. No sooner had Coulter climbed from his canoe than the warriors swarmed over him, seizing his weapons and stripping him naked. As Potts still refused to beach his canoe, one of the Blackfeet raised his musket and shot him in the hip. Potts fell to the bottom of the canoe, then pulled himself up and fired back, killing an Indian. Infuriated, the Blackfeet loosed a fatal volley that riddled Potts. Some waded into the river and pulled the canoe to the bank, where they butchered the corpse and flung the pieces in Coulter's face. Coulter expected to be executed at once. After a council, however, the leader pointed east across a level plain and in the Crow language declared, "Go. Go away." Coulter started walking, then quickly saw the purpose: a race for life. Off he bounded, a crowd of whooping Blackfeet in pursuit. A powerful man and swift runner, he gradually left them behind, aiming for the Madison River 5 miles distant. However, halfway across the open plain, blood began to spurt from his nose and mouth. But only one of the Indians remained close on his heels. Suddenly stopping and turning, Coulter confronted his adversary, who rushed forward with a spear. Coulter seized it and threw the man off balance. The spear broke, leaving the head and part of the shaft in Coulter's hands. The Indian fell on his back, and Coulter rammed the spearhead through his body. Retrieving the weapon and grabbing the dead man's blanket, Coulter resumed his dash as the howling throng came into view. Reaching the Madison River, he dove in and swam to a nearby raft of driftwood. Plunging beneath it, he made his way up until he got his head above the surface of the water. There he remained throughout the day, as the Indians searched the riverbanks and even tramped on the top of the woodpile. Finally, they gave up and left. Spared quick death at the hands of the Blackfeet, Coulter faced slow death by starvation and exposure. Alone in the wilderness, naked except for a blanket, weaponless except for the spear point, his feet shredded by a prickly pear, he started the agonizing journey for Fort Raymond, more than 200 miles distant. He traveled both day and night, pausing only for hasty rests. Roots and tree bark furnished his only food. 11 days later, more dead than alive, he reached his destination. Jed Smith's encounter with a grizzly bear. Jedediah Smith struck west from Fort Kiowa late in September 1823. His little company numbered 16, most with bonds forged on the sand beach. Among them were Bill Sublette, Tom Fitzpatrick, Jim Kleiman, and Thomas Eddy. But their objective, the heart of the Crow country. 5 days into the expedition, it nearly lost its captain. Leading exhausted horses single file through a brushy bottom, the men spotted a big grizzly bear charging down a slope toward the center of the line. The beast turned and raced to the head of the column just as Smith emerged from a thicket. Instantly, the bear pounced, seizing him and throwing him to the ground, smashing several ribs and clawing his head. None of the trappers claimed medical skills, but Smith directed 1 or 2 men to go for water and said, as Kleiman wrote, "If you have a needle and thread, get it out and sew up my wounds around my head." It bled copiously, for the scalp had been torn nearly off and hung only by an ear. Kleiman found a needle and thread, got a pair of scissors and cut off his hair, and then began my first job of dressing wounds. He got the scalp sewed back on, but said there was nothing to be done for the ear. Smith insisted that Kleiman try. He did. I put my needle stitching it through and over, laying the lacerated parts together as nice as I could with my hands. Within 2 weeks, Smith had recovered sufficiently to resume his captaincy, although he bore scars for the rest of his life. This gave us a lesson on the character of the grizzly bear, which we did not forget, observed Kleiman. Joe Meek. Stout, fun-loving Joseph L. Meek, 19 years of age, came to the mountains with the Sublette caravan of 1829. His Missouri friends and neighbors Robert Doc Newell and George Ebert went with the same train. Over the next decade, all three developed into superb mountain men. They came to know the Rockies in intimate detail, took beaver, and fought Blackfeet with the best, and won the respect of such giants as the Sublettes, Bridger, and Fitzpatrick. Meek enlarged his experience and geographic knowledge in 1833 when he enlisted in Joseph Walker's expedition to California. Meek was a droll creature, remembered an acquaintance, a tall man of fine appearance, a most genial, kind, and brave spirit. He had in his composition no malice, no envy, and no hatred. All three friends left a mark on history, but Joe Meek found a way to portray his exploits, buffoonery, and genuine accomplishments in such graphic and often embroidered narrative as to convince posterity that the Old West boasted no man like Joe. Joe Meek. Jedediah Smith and the Umpqua Massacre. Through April and May, the company climbed from the valley and turned toward the ocean. The jagged mountains and sheer cliffs scoured by the Trinity and Klamath rivers proved nearly impassable for men herding more than 300 horses. Game all but disappeared. Indians hovered on the flanks, loosing arrows when chance offered. Fog slowed and often halted progress. Horses and mules crowded narrow trails and plunged to their deaths on rocky precipices. At times, a mile or less was counted as a good day's travel. At other times, a route barred by a mountainside or canyon forced a long trek on the back trail. The lower Umpqua Indians came to trade. They seemed friendly, and as shown by their possessions, were customers of the Hudson's Bay Company. Smith remained wary. In earlier skirmishes, his men had killed 2 Indians, and now, to retrieve a stolen axe, he tied up a chief until it was returned. He instructed his men to keep on their guard. On July 14, Smith took 2 men and an Indian guide up the river by canoe to find a crossing. In camp, about 100 Indians mingled with the trappers in a trading session. Drifting back downstream late in the morning, Smith could see no activity in his camp. Suddenly, the guide grabbed Smith's rifle and dove into the water as Indians concealed along the shore opened fire. Frantically, the 3 whites paddled to the opposite bank, scrambled ashore, and took to the woods. Scanning the campsite from the hills across the river, Smith drew an accurate conclusion. His men, lulled by the evidence of a Hudson's Bay Company relationship, had dropped their guard, and the Indians had struck. Unknown to Smith, 1 man had escaped. The rest, 15 in all, had been axed to death. And all the contents of the camp, including 728 beaver pelts and 228 horses and mules, fell into the hands of the Umpqua. Alone and all but destitute in dangerous wilderness, Smith and his 2 companions had but one chance: to seek relief from the Hudson's Bay Company. Joe Walker in California. In contrast to Jedediah Smith, still sourly remembered in California, Walker met with a cordial reception. He carried a passport and a Mexican visa, and he benefited from the mediation of an American ship captain. His courtesy, respect for foreign sensibilities, and firm control of his men promoted harmony with Governor Jose Figueroa and his officers. Walker and his followers could remain all winter, the governor decreed, move freely about the country, and take all the game they wanted. They could not, however, trap for beaver or trade with Indians, ostensibly what they had come to do. Walker had no wish to attempt another harrowing crossing of the Sierras. Instead, like Jedediah Smith, in the spring of 1834, Walker led his trappers up the San Joaquin Valley to seek a way around the southern end of the range. Indians showed the way up the Kern River, and the portal that later became Walker Pass led the company down to the Owens Valley. Here, about a dozen of the free trappers, some of whom had probably trapped the Gila out of Taos, went their own way. After plundering and terrorizing the inoffensive Hopis and their mesa-top mud towns, these men ended in Santa Fe. The rest of Walker's party struck northeast, seeking to reach the Humboldt and the way back to Rendezvous. The route proved waterless, and the men restive, so they fell back and followed the well-watered Sierra foothills until intersecting their westbound trail. Once more in the Humboldt's sink, they had a deadly encounter with Paiutes that took 14 Indian lives. By July 1834, they had reunited with Bonneville on the Bear River.